Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I am going to be talking to you guys all about grain mills and milling your own flour fresh in your home. If you guys are new around here, my name is Becca. I'm a registered dietitian and I am super passionate about sharing nutrition information with you guys that is easy to understand and simple for the everyday person. And I'm so excited to talk about this specific topic today because it is something that I personally have recently got into and honestly was always kind of intimidating by milling my own flour, and to be honest didn't even really use a whole ton of flour up until recently. So I am so excited to kind of break down this whole topic with you guys and just give you all the info. Okay, so if you didn't know, you can actually mill your own flour at home fresh. So obviously you can go to the store, you can buy flour in those paper bags, super easy, but there are actually a lot of health benefits to milling it fresh, and I'm gonna dive into that first. So to understand the benefits of milling your flour fresh, you have to kind of understand the benefits in general of grains. So when it comes to grains, there are, if you're looking at one single grain, there are three main layers. There is the outer layer, which is called the bran. Then there is the endosperm, which is kind of the starchy inner layer. And then in the very center, there is the germ, which is kind of like the nucleus or the embryo. And the bran, which is the outer layer, and the germ are where most of the nutrients are packed. And by nutrients, I mean lots of B vitamins, phosphorus, zinc, magnesium, antioxidants, fiber, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat. And they also contain specifically phytochemicals and polyphenols, both of which have pretty potent antioxidant activity. So to make flour, you take a bunch of those little grains, you grind them up into a powder form, and that is flour as we know it. But here is the thing, as soon as that grain is ground up, all of those nutrients that are in there are no longer intact and they're vulnerable. So as time passes, those nutrients will diminish within the flour, which is one of the biggest benefits of grinding your flour fresh and eating it right away versus picking up a sack of flour that's been sitting on the shelf for who knows how long. Another benefit of milling your own flour at home is you are literally dumping the grains into your flour mill and you are then using the flour that comes directly out of it. When you're purchasing flour from a store, a lot of times the bran and the germ, which like I said are the most nutrient-packed parts of that grain, they are often removed. Now when it comes to white flour, it's typically just endosperm. So you're not getting really any of that bran or germ in your flour, so you're missing out on almost all of the nutrient profile that is in that entire grain. Now when it comes to whole wheat, the bran and germ are often removed and then some will be added back in, but it's never quite to the same level as if you were just to grind that grain and then not process it whatsoever. And this is also why a lot of our grains are enriched. They'll have B vitamins, folic acid, really, things like that added into the flour to try and boost the nutrient profile that was kind of diminished through the processing. But again, it's never gonna be quite at that peak level that naturally the grain contains. And then also when you add in that time factor of it sitting on the shelf for a long time, it's just never going to compare that fresh milled flour with all of its nutrient intact, you're eating it right away, versus even a whole wheat flour, like the best organic whole wheat flour you can buy in the store. It's just never going to quite compare. Now real quick, just to explain a little bit why that bran and germ are often removed, or a lot of it's removed and not all are placed back in, and that is because this extends shelf life. So a lot of the nutrients, specifically that vitamin E, can oxidize and it can make the flour go bad. And obviously for shelf life purposes, we don't want flour spoiling quickly. So when you are milling your own flour at home, it's not gonna have nearly the shelf life as the flour in the store. But again, that is because it is manipulated, not necessarily in a bad way, but in a way that does decrease the nutrients because a lot of it's taken out. A lot of what spoils is taken out. But that is why, that's really the main reason why it's manipulated in this way, and it's just to improve shelf life. So those are the main health benefits. Now I kind of want to move into all of the other benefits because there are lots when it comes to milling your own flour at home. So first and foremost, to make flour, you need wheat berries or grains. So instead of going to the store and buying flour, you are instead going to buy grain. You typically bulk amount of grains. So the good thing about this is they pretty much last indefinitely. If they're kept in a cool, dry place, you are going to have those grains pretty much forever and they're not really going to go bad, versus flour, eventually, even if you're getting, you know, white flour with hardly any bran and germ intact and it's got super long shelf life, it's still not going to last as long as just the intact grains themselves. Next, I want to talk about flavor. So the flavor of fresh milled flour is so much more rich. So when you have flour that's sitting out on a shelf, a lot of those fats that are in there, again, over time are going to start to oxidize, which can make even the most high quality, amazing, best, you know, available on the market flour, over time they will get a slight bitter taste to them. Now, I am not a food critic by any means. These are not the kind of things that I personally pick up on. I'm just not that picky. But if you are someone who is super passionate about food and flavor profiles, this is definitely a huge perk of milling your own flour at home. It's going to be like a little bit lighter, a little bit sweeter, versus having that more bitter, slight bitter taste to it. Another really cool thing about this is you have the choice to pretty much make whatever flour you want. If you have your own flour mill at home and you have access to the internet, you can pretty much order any type of grain, even if it's a gluten-free type grain out there, and make whatever flour you want. So a lot of times, you know, the more obscure flours are tough to find in stores, or they can be really pricey. So you know, once you invest in the flour mill, you can have that and make whatever you want. I personally have not gotten crazy at all. I've only so far made einkorn flour, as well as just a whole wheat flour from hard white wheat berries. Again, this is all pretty new to me, so I haven't really ventured out and done anything really crazy with something fun and exciting, but you totally could. Okay, so speaking of pricey, I want to break down cost for you guys. So when I've been talking about my this whole flour mill situation adventure on my Instagram, this is probably the most frequently asked question I get. Like, what truly is the cost comparison from buying whole wheat berries and grinding them up yourself to buying flour just at the store, which is obviously very easy and typically is not very expensive. Now, obviously, the prices will fluctuate depending on what you're buying. So if you're buying einkorn or you're buying a hard white wheat, it just obviously is all going to depend. But I did a little cost breakdown for you guys using hard white wheat berries, which is what I use to make my whole wheat flour, and then just like organic berries, and then organic whole wheat flour that you would find at the store. Okay, so I have all the numbers written down here because they're not my strong suit, so I'm gonna read them off to you. So for a 50-pound bag of hard white wheat berries, which makes about 150 cups of flour, whole wheat flour, organic, it costs $33 for that 50-pound bag of grains, which comes out to about 22 cents per cup of flour, so 22 cents. Okay, now looking at whole wheat flour, store-bought organic whole wheat flour, I'm pretty sure I used the King Arthur organic whole wheat for this comparison, because that was always my choice. For a 5-pound bag, it gives you 18 cups, and it's $10 a bag. So for each of those cups, it costs about 55 cents. So that is obviously a lot higher than the 22 cents per cup. So it is cheaper to make the flour at home yourself from the grains. Now, two things, of course, to factor in. One, you have to actually pay for the grain mill. That is an upfront investment, which I'll talk about that more in a second. But also a downside to purchasing grains online is you have to pay for shipping, and shipping is not cheap. 50 pounds of grains getting sent through the mail, you know, that is not casual. So for me, for the specific, I got it from Central Milling, it actually cost me more to ship it than it actually cost to buy the berries. It costs $75 total. So that comes out to 50 cents a cup, which is still lower. It's 55 cents for the organic whole wheat store-bought, but it's kind of nominal. And obviously you're paying for the flour mill as well. So here is the hack. If you can find, whether it's like a farmer's market or even just like a grain mill near you locally that sells grain berries or wheat berries, that is gonna be your best bet, because then you don't have to pay for shipping, you can get them fairly cheap, and then it's gonna be very inexpensive for you to make amazing, high quality, very nutritious whole wheat flour. So that is definitely your best option. But even if you have to pay the expensive shipping online, it's gonna come out to about the same, possibly even a little bit lower. And again, you're getting a much higher quality flour with a much more robust nutrient profile than just buying the store-bought flour. So even if it ended up being a little bit more expensive versus a little bit less expensive with all of the shipping costs included, Me personally, I would still be happy to pay that little bit of extra because you're getting so much more for your money versus, you know, a flour that's been sitting on the shelf for months and it's just at that point kind of devoid of most of the nutrients it originally had. Okay, now let's talk about flour mills. So I have what's called a Nutrimill. The other most popular brand that I know of, again, there might be more, I'm new to this, is Mill. That's the other one I hear people often talk about. I think either one is a safe bet. So the one that I purchased was a Nutrimill and it was $249. And then there is and the mock mills are more expensive. They have a lot more different versions as well, and they can really get up there in price. The Nutrimills seem to be a little bit more on the affordable side. The $249 was the cheapest option they had, and then they also had one that's like quieter for I think like $300 or $350. But I will link I will link both of those websites down below if you guys want to go check them out. So obviously, initial investment of the actual flour mill, but it should last you years and years and years. And I've heard great things about both mills being really reliable and will last you a very long time and really do a great job making flour. So once you have the initial investment, then you're just looking at buying bulk grains, which if you can find them locally and organic, score. That is best case scenario. You're gonna have amazing flour for really very cheap, and it's gonna be so much higher quality and so much more nutritious than what you would buy in the store. But even if you end up, like me, having to pay shipping costs, it still comes out to be about the same, maybe a little less depending on what, you know, type of grain you're looking at, but you are getting so much more for that money, so much more nutrition. And to me, when I'm looking at food and cooking and nourishing my body and the bodies of my family members, those are the kinds of things that I think are worth paying for or even worth going the extra mile for. Okay, next I want to give you guys a little demo on how you actually use it. It is so easy. I have always been really intimidated by these. I've actually wanted to get one for a really long time, but just never really thought twice about it because I was like, oh, that just seems like a lot of work and who has time for that? But truthfully, you do have time for that. It is so quick and so easy. It takes, I mean, literally minutes to have this fresh, amazing, nutrient-packed flour. Of course, is it faster just to pull a bag of flour out of the pantry or out of the cabinet and scoop a cup in there? Of course it is. But the amount of extra time you're spending on milling it yourself really is so small. It's so worth it. Okay guys, so here is my grain mill. Isn't she cute? Okay, so up top here, this is where you place all of the grain berries. And then once you have your flour, it's basically just in this lower chamber. So I'm gonna show you guys the full process. I pretty much just leave this out on my counter all the time because I'm not super picky about what's on my counter, to be honest. But I could totally put this away if I wanted to. And then in this cabinet here, this is where I store things related to my grain mill. So I have this jar. These are hard white wheat berries. It's very low, as you can see. In my pantry, I have a huge box that has the whole plastic storage bin that has the 50 pounds in it. But I just like to fill up this little half-gallon jar just to keep handy for when I'm making flour. And I also keep another big jar in here for any leftover flour. Typically I try and use whatever I make because again, it does spoil faster, but sometimes I do have some left over and I'll just stick it in this jar. For example, right now I have some einkorn flour in here that was milled a couple days ago. I'm gonna use that tonight and mill some more to make tacos. And then I actually have a bunch of einkorn berries up here that I need to get a storage container for. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys what you do. It's super easy. Here are my organic hard white wheat berries. I'm just going to pour those in the top. I pretty much eyeball it every single time, but I guess you could get fancy and figure out how many cups you need and how many wheat berries that would be. So then I'm just gonna turn it on, and it's super loud, so I'm not gonna subject you to that. And then about a minute later, you have fresh ground flour in this little underneath section here. So I'll show you guys. Look at all of that beautiful fresh ground flour that is ready to be made into something delicious and nutritious. Okay, you guys, so that is it for this video. I hope you learned something new. I know this is something that so many of you guys on Instagram were super curious to learn more about, so I hope that you found this video helpful. I am totally obsessed with milling all of my own flour, and I did say in the very beginning of this video, I didn't even really used to use a lot of flour, and that is so true. But once I got into sourdough and making sourdough products and keeping a sourdough starter, I use a ton of flour because I am making stuff all of the time. And the cool thing is I can digest it, no problem. I never really baked goods or any type of products with flour because it always bothered my stomach, so I just never even really cared to do it. But with sourdough and then also with einkorn, I have no problem. So I have been making all kinds of stuff. I have been, like, my sourdough starter is doing great. I'm having so much fun with that. And we are now, you know, consuming this really nutrient-packed flour multiple times a week, which I really love. But that's all I have, you guys. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to also follow me on Instagram as well. I'm always asking for your feedback and your ideas and what you want to see on there. But that is it for this video. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.